Doctor straightened up from the console and ran a hand through the curling tangle of his hair as he contemplated the controls he'd been manipulating. Then his head moved with a slight jerk as something, he knew not what, put him onto the alert. Even though there was no portraying sound to interrupt the gentle hum of the TARDIS in flight, no break in the steady rise and fall of the time rotor, somehow he was not surprised when a familiar voice spoke from behind him.
"Hello, Doctor. Your dematerialization circuit's been restored, I see."
The Doctor swung round and beamed.
"Ah, Dasterium. Hello. I was beginning to think you'd forgotten all about me."
Dasterium came to join him at the console, smiling at him.
"Trust me, and I won't be the last person to say this, no one's ever going to forget you, Doctor."
"Of course not. Why would they? I'm a memorable sort of fellow."
While he was speaking, she placed her two palms flat on the console for a few moments, her fingers outspread, her eyes following the movement of the time rotor before they turned toward him again, twinkling mischievously.
"A memorable sort of fellow wearing a memorable sort of scarf. I think you could safely say that that alone will fall into the category of an aid memoir where you're concerned."
"Rather good, isn't it? Do you like it? I like it. Would you like a jelly baby?"
The Doctor inquired, suddenly brandishing a crumpled and slightly torn paper bag at her.
The orange ones are particularly good, you know.
"Like you, Doctor, I'm always open to new experiences."
She scanned the contents of the bag before delicately selecting and withdrawing the chosen sweet. She popped it into her mouth, and her eyes widened appreciatively as she chewed. The Doctor beamed again, and ate one himself before pushing the bag back into his pocket.
"Would you like me to go and find Sarah?"
he offered, a mischievous gleam in his eye.
"She's gone off to get herself a change of clothes, but I'm sure she'd love to meet you. Though, of course, I should warn you she's a journalist. She'd be likely to ask you some very searching questions. I wonder if she'd be able to get any of the answers out of you that I haven't been able to.
She's just as likely to ask them of you, particularly when she finds out that you're not going from Loch Ness straight back to London, as you promised."
"What do you mean I'm not?"
"Does the TARDIS go where you intend, as a rule?"
"Well, often enough to suit me. I've never been an admirer of rules, you know."
Asterium arched an amused eyebrow at him.
"Would you have left Gallifrey in the first place if you were?"
"Well, rules are there to be broken, aren't they?"
"So your proposition is that people get up in the morning and say to themselves, 'What shall I do today? I know. I'll make up a whole new set of rules, not because there's good purpose behind them, but just so that other people can break them. How useful I shall be doing that.' Sorry, Doctor, but somehow I think there's a flaw in the logic there."
"Do you really? I've always found that approach rather successful myself."
"Whereas I have the strongest possible suspicion that when people make rules, they intend them to be kept, not broken. What you really mean, of course, is that you're going to be your own arbiter of which rules you obey and which ones you don't. The one to decide if the rules are right or wrong."
"Of course I am,"
said the Doctor, as if that should have been obvious. Then he added sharply,
"Are you criticizing me?"
Dasterium raised her eyebrows innocently.
"Would I do that?"
The Doctor leaned toward her with an unsettlingly intent stare.
"Look me in the eye and tell me you've never broken any rules."
"Of course I have. I'm doing it at this very moment, in fact. If I didn't think along similar lines to you, Doctor, would I take such pleasure in your company? Like calls to like, isn't that what they say?"
"Oh, they say lots of things, most of which I don't bother listening to. Breaking rules now, did you say? You did say that, didn't you? Which rules would those be, I wonder?"
"That's for me to know, and you to find out. For the time being, at least. Though we will, of course, be seeing each other again, Doctor."
"Ah, of course. Though I can't help regretting that once again you aren't yet ready to explain the reason for these repeated intrusions into my life. Are you sure you haven't been sent by the Time Lords? You have a very irritating tendency to keep interfering in my affairs. I think you ought to know that I really don't care for it."
His eyes and voice both suddenly hinted at a formidable degree of resentment, if not anger.
"When one considers your record, If interference is a characteristic of the Time Lords, it seems to be one you share.
Oh, I much prefer to think of it as lending a hand. That sounds like a much more positive motive, don't you think? Anyway, everyone interferes. Just by being alive, by existing. Every individual affects the course of events. Is that what you call interference? I call it living. And by the way, you haven't answered my question.
Dastariam smiled, conceding the point.
It's a question you've asked me once before. It's all right, Doctor. The answer hasn't changed. I give you my word. I have not been sent by the Time Lords.
The Doctor studied her for a few moments, thoughtfully rubbing his nose, before allowing a smile to spread across his face once again.
Perhaps you wouldn't mind also giving me your word that one day you'll explain why you keep dropping in for these little chats of yours. I must say I'll be fascinated to know the reason. Or reasons. Perhaps there's more than one. Ah! Now there's a thought. You will tell me, won't you?
Dastariam inclined her head.
One day, Doctor. That I promise you. But not today.
Ah, well, in that case, I suppose you'll be going. After all, you never stay very long, and you know what they say, don't you?
Dastariam looked at him quizzically.
And what do they say?
Here today, Zygon tomorrow.
At which she began to laugh. A laugh that lingered long after she had vanished.
And there she was, gone.
The Doctor announced to the empty control room. Then he shrugged and returned his attention to the console, knowing full well that Dastariam was right, that wherever the TARDIS took him next, it almost certainly wouldn't be where he intended, because it almost never was.
Quite right, too. Where would be the fun in that?